Mike Bernard with us here on Wednesday morning, day before Thanksgiving. Mike, how are you doing?
Doing well, Coach. How about yourself?
Oh man, it's just been one of those days, and looking
Yeah.
forward to a little turkey tomorrow. What about yourself?
Yep. Finish up here, go do some play-by-play for local basketball and get ready for football on Turkey Day.
Yeah, the Bills and the Lions, they're going to kick off at 12:30 Eastern time on CBS. Bills tied for first place in the AFC East with the Dolphins. They travel to Detroit to take on the Lions. Interestingly, they played in Detroit last week, but not against the Lions. They had to have a home game against the Browns, moved to Detroit due to a snowstorm. They beat the Browns 31-23. And for the first time now, you've got an NFL team that's playing in a road venue twice within the same week.
Yeah, within 4 days. Quite unusual. It should be an advantage for Buffalo here. They had lost two straight prior to getting that win over Cleveland. The Bills opened nine. They're now mainly 9.5 or 10. The total has been bet up to 54.5. Lions, don't sleep on them. They are on a 3-game win streak, but their wins were over the Giants, the Bears, and the Packers, 3 weak teams. Detroit stepping up in class on Thanksgiving Day, but getting 10 points, that's going to be my lean in this game.
Later on in the afternoon at 4:30 Eastern on Fox, we've got the Giants and the Cowboys. NFC East battle of the second place teams. Of course, the Eagles lead that division with a 9-1 record. Both these teams sitting at 7-3. Giants coming off a disappointing loss at home to Detroit. The Cowboys defeated the Vikings 40-3 on the road. That game was so lopsided. It was like the old college days when they had the regional coverage. CBS switched to another game in the third quarter. Cowboys were so far ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and I actually I needed over in that game, and I knew even with the fourth quarter yet to play, that they weren't going to get 7 points because both teams had shut it down. CBS took it off, sent us to the Bengals Steelers game, and the Vikings were exposed in that game. They're a fraudulent team, okay, and I don't care if you pull for the Vikings or not. They're not. They're the worst 8-2 NFL team statistically ever. So Dallas had their way. You mentioned Giants disappointing. They lost by 2 touchdowns at home to the Lions. We have to be careful about overreaction here. That's a big key in NFL handicapping. Do not allow recency bias to creep in. Dallas looked unbeatable 4 days ago. The Giants were down 31-12 late in the fourth quarter at home. It actually looks like a good spot for the Lions. I'm going to go with the underdog here in a divisional game. All the public's going to be on the home team. I'll take the Giants.
All right, prime time on NBC tomorrow night. We've got the 6-4 Patriots and the 8-2 Vikings. Speaking of the Vikings, both offensive struggled last week. The Vikings didn't score a touchdown, and they were indoors with no weather problems whatsoever. The Patriots didn't score a touchdown until the punt return with 5 seconds to go in the game. But those weather conditions there, the wind and everything was pretty atrocious on both those offenses. But, I'm going to tell you, I question the Jets coaching staff, their end of the game philosophy there. They just gave the Patriots a chance to win the game. It was crazy. I could not believe that they actually kicked to the returner with under 10 seconds to go.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, you just kick it out of bounds at the 30, and, they've got 15 seconds left to, get into field goal range against the wind. So, hey, look, neither team could muster an offensive touchdown. And Coach, that Patriot touchdown to end the game was one of the worst bad beats of the season. If you had the Jets plus 3.5, I mean, are you kidding? Because if he gets tackled anywhere, even in field goal range, you're going to still win. Tough beat there. Fortunately, I didn't have a position in that game. New England's offense, they're going to be glad to be indoors for this one. I do not expect a track meet to break out, but I do expect both offenses to be more effective Thursday night. Looks like the odds makers have this game pegged. I'm not going to play it.
Okay, if the NFL is not your cup of tea or that Pats Viking game turns into a yawner, you can switch over to ESPN. Catch a little college football, the Egg Bowl, Mississippi State at Ole Miss. Um, Rebels, a few weeks ago, they were the darling of the Southeast, ranked in the AP top 10, 7-0, looking for a way to get into the playoffs. Now they've lost 3 of their last 4. Average defeat is 2 touchdowns. Bulldogs started out 5-1. They were ranked in the top 20, but they've struggled of late, losing 3 of their 4 last SEC games. And also just kind of remember that both of these teams lost to Alabama, and they lost the week after playing Alabama. So that should tell you something about what playing Alabama does to you physically, mentally, emotionally, the whole gamut there. Now, one sidebar that almost eclipses the game is the Lane Kiffin to Auburn story. And you know the players are hearing about this right now.
Yeah, a lot of distractions for Ole Miss. Rebels are coming off a 42-17 loss to Arkansas. They were in a flat spot, and I don't know what to think of the Lane Kiffin news. You're going to have more insight on that than I will. Ole Miss, they've also gone flat since blowing that Alabama game.
Who knows what Kiffin's going to do, whether he'll leave and go to Auburn, whether he'll stick around Oxford, maybe wait on another job to open up in a couple of 3 years. But whatever, it certainly adds an element to this game that has Rebel fans nervous one way or the other.
Yeah, and look, from a handicapping standpoint, you and I have been, this is our 8th year together on TV and radio. And one thing that we agree on is, the revenge factor is not that notable unless it helps a team focus on preparation, right? But one thing that is a bigger factor is these distractions, because that affects players across the board, the coaching staff, and it puts doubt in there. The kids are saying they've seen all these coaches say, "Hey, I'm staying put. I'm staying put. I'm staying put." And then the next day they're on a bus or a plane, right?
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, we can go back 20 plus years to Tommy Tuberville being at Ole Miss, and rumors were he was in line for the Auburn job. And he famously went on television before the Egg Bowl and said, hey, they'll have to carry me out of Oxford in a pine box. Well, evidently, that airplane that took him to Auburn was made of pine. And then, 15 years ago, Nick Saban stood on the podium in Miami and said, hey, I guess I've just got to say this. I'm not going to be the coach at Alabama next year. And I guess in a way, he wasn't telling a lie, because he wasn't just the coach at Alabama the next year. He's been there for 15 years now.
Yeah, and wasn't there a similar situation with Franchione? I mean, we're just focusing on 2 schools, but
Yeah.
we've seen it. We saw Lane Kiffin's done that at multiple schools.
Mm-hmm.
I know he got fired at the Raiders, and you forget he was the head coach of the Oakland Raiders of the NFL for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
But look at all his stops:
Mm-hmm.
Florida Atlantic, Tennessee, Alabama OC. I understand it. I mean, I don't think he's a fit for Auburn, because every place is a stepping stone for him.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's Auburn's a unique place. You have to be you just putting Lane Kiffin at Auburn is like putting a square peg in a round hole. It's, you can try all you want to, but it's just not going to be a good fit.
What do you think about Hugh Freeze? I feel like he's a better fit. Well, I'm going to ask you 2 people, mention 2 names. Hugh Freeze, one. I've always thought the best fit, and I'm not sure if he wants anything to do with it, is Bill Clark.
Yeah, I don't know what Bill's situation is right now. I don't know. I know he has enjoyed his year out of coaching, away from the pressure and everything, as he's recovered from his back surgery. I don't know if he wants to step back into it or not. As far as Freeze goes, I think, again, right or wrong, Auburn people always look at what's going on at Alabama, and if they can get a coach that's beaten Alabama 2 times back to back years when Alabama was at the top of their game and he was at Ole Miss, that seems like a no-brainer for Auburn because that's like it or not. And and I was a GA there, a lot of fond memories at Auburn. But like it or not, Auburn people and certain boosters, they want to compare themselves to what's going on at Alabama. And it's just like Coach Dye said, Auburn can play football for 500 more years. They're never going to have the history that Alabama has. And Coach Dye was always big about, we don't need to worry about what Alabama's doing. We just need to be Auburn.
Yeah. Well, okay. So Tuberville beat Alabama a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Chiswick beat Alabama in key games.
Mm-hmm.
Malzahn, look, Auburn's had a better success against Alabama than any team. I think even more so than Clemson. Even Clemson beat them twice in title games.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that you want to, but you already have more success than anyone else. I'm not saying just resign yourself to sitting on the sideline, but right now, the way Auburn can beat Alabama every 3 years is outstanding compared to what everyone else can do.
Yeah, but you have to remember, I think it was back in the late 80s or early 90s, Janet Jackson had a song, "What Have You Done For Me Lately?" And that is what they're worried about at Auburn. And if you didn't beat Alabama the last time you played them, it doesn't matter. You haven't had a good year, and that's not a good look for Auburn. And it's not something that they should be basing their success on, to be quite frankly, because if you're going to base whether you have a successful season or not on whether you beat Alabama, usually there are 10 to 11 teams each year, if not more, that can say we haven't had a successful season.
Yeah, exactly. And look at Les Miles. He's got a title. Coach O has a title. They're both gone, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Gus played for a title. Chiswick had one. They're all gone. So it's like, I tell you, but here's the last thing I'll say about this. I assume it's going to be the last thing, but people I've read where, and again, my position is I need to decide and determine who's going to cover and who's going to win. That's my job.
Right.
I get it. But I also been a fan of the sport for my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read to where people have had taken issue. These moral policemen have taken issue with Hugh Freeze, his past. And I'm like, wait a minute. He is at an evangelical college, and if they can get past it, why would a public school, and it's not like they haven't, all schools have skeletons, but to
Sure.
me, that's just a weak argument. I feel like he would be a good fit if he wanted to go there.
I think you would too. And you're going to get the naysayers. And frankly, you'll have Alabama fans that they will scorn Auburn for hiring such a immoral
You're right.
person, but again, let's not forget that Nick Saban tried to get him as a analyst after he was let go from Ole Miss, and Greg Sankey in the SEC office, they nixed that deal.
Yeah. Well, and, you talked about how Alabama fans would do that. They would, and absolutely they would. Just as back when Bill Curry was at at Alabama, and he couldn't beat Auburn, all the Auburn fans were like, "Oh, you're going to fire your coach. He went 10-2." Like,
That's right.
they wanted him to stay there because he couldn't beat Auburn.
That's it. Now listen, you're pretty, I've been around a lot of people, but you're, as far as being able to rattle off stats and things like that, you're among the very best I've ever been around. Now, has there been another school? Has there been another school where 3 consecutive head coaches have won titles, national titles? Because at LSU, you mentioned Orgeron and Les Miles, and then of course Les Miles, he replaced Nick Saban, who won a title at LSU. Has there ever been a school that had 3 consecutive head coaches win titles at that school?
No one in the SEC, right? Other than what you just mentioned. I'm trying to think, and even if you think back to like Bud Wilkinson days, right? There wasn't, the the predecessor leaves, and then the protege or whoever comes in. I don't think so. Is this a trivia question, or do you know the answer?
No, this is just something that, of course, it happens with us. Just popped into my head as we were having our conversation. The
Oh,
only
Miami. Okay, Snellenberger, Jimmy Johnson, and Dennis Erickson.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly. Well, they had 4 because didn't Coker won one, didn't he?
Yeah, so that would if was that. Wait a minute. After Erickson, was it Coker the whole from Erickson all the way to 2000 something?
Wait a second. No, Butch Davis was sandwiched in there between Erickson and
Did he
Coker,
win
wasn't he?
one?
No, he did
If
not win one.
Okay,
No.
yeah. So that would be Miami. Would be the only other one
Yeah.
I can think of.
Now, Ohio State, if you take out the interim label off of Luke Fickell the year that he was there as interim, and if you take him out, Ryan Day has got a chance because if he wins one, then you fall back to Urban Meyer, then you fall back to Jim Tressel.
Yeah, Tressel, Fickell was interim,
then
and then Urban Meyer. Right. Yeah.
And
yeah.
so
That's
if Ryan Day can win a national championship, that would be 3. But I can't, again, I don't know if the trivial police make you count Luke Fickell's year or not.
true.
I don't know.
Hey, look, if we're wrong on Twitter or on comments or something, we'll hear from the guy that, wakes up on his granny's couch and watch Sports Center and tells us how dumb we are.
Exactly. All right, Mike. We appreciate your time on this Wednesday, and we'll be back as always. Actually, we'll be back tomorrow. We're going to take Friday off, so we'll cover Saturday's games tomorrow on Thanksgiving morning before we get into that turkey.
Yep, good games to cover too. I look forward to it.